welcome everyone to Tier 3 as we now jump in for Console Tier 3. Normally I would be joined by the one and only Flynn, but unfortunately for this evening, he is not feeling too great, so he cannot join. So it'll just be me, Darkness, for tonight's stream. For round 6, we find ourselves going around Abu Dhabi, a race that once held a lot of controversy. In fact, just 635 days ago, we all experienced one of the most controversial races in F1 history, where Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton were in a fight for the championship. Both drivers were tied at the exact same number of points at the start of the round. At the end of it, we had one hell of a finish, and many will disagree, many will agree with it, but we don't care about that result, because now we're here to try and see our own result for Console Tier 3. In fact, I've got a bug with the audio. There we go. As we see Luca, he is the first driver out for qualifying. Unfortunately, we missed just the first 30 seconds, but that's fine. Luca will be the first one to cross the line to set a provisional pole lap time. Whilst we see Luca now coming towards the final couple of corners, we are going to be able to run on board with him and check out what kind of lap time can the Ferrari man produce. Can he put on one hell of a performance for his first hot lap and be unbeaten for at least some of the session, going a little bit wide out of that first corner, but managing to stay within the limits even though he crossed the white line. Now coming through towards the end of the first sector, you've got the first long left-hander, fifth corner, change to the 2021 season. And of course he will set a purple first sector as he is the first driver out on the road. Now coming down, he's got a very long straight. This is the first of two DRS straights, very long, all the way down to very quick. You got to gear down, very careful not to lock your rears into the very tight chicane of McLaren, being able to get out of the way just in time. DRS wide open for the second time in this session. DRS straight here is much shorter in the run down towards turn 9. We're going to see a lot of overtakes around this corner. Very wide, no banking, unlike Zandvoort. But still quite an incredible corner to watch drivers try and go too wide. Now for the third sector, two quick left-handers back-to-back. Famous corner here, actually, as we saw Nicholas Latifi unfortunately smash his car into the wall, bringing out that controversial safety car. Now around that final corner, what can the provisional pole time be for Luca? Across the line, it's going to be a 1:22.042. An incredible lap time for the Ferrari man. But next cross line will be a McLaren. I think that will be the likes of Nino. He's going to start a out lap, or his first hot lap of the session. Next cross line is going to be an AlphaTauri, which is Justin. And it's a Mercedes to come towards the line next. Here we go with Zorzo for his first out lap session. I'm trying to see which driver is on for a hot lap. It looks like Jacob will be the second driver to cross the line to set a time on the screen. Can he beat the provisional pole? It looks like he just might miss out just by 4/10, unfortunately, a 22.411 for the Alfa Romeo driver, but still an incredible lap. But as the evening goes on, we've got 14 minutes remaining. Lap times will ramp up, and without a doubt, we will have drivers in the 1:21s, or at least high 21s in this session, as Pico puts it across the line for a 1:22.4. In fact, 1/100th of a second slower than Jacob, as Danielle, our current championship leader in the standings with 64 points, puts it in, pardon me, for a 22.1. Let's have a look. We saw Justin earlier, he was starting his lap. He's coming through that second sector. No, he's coming through that third sector now. Got that one left-hander now, the two right-handers. He's got 4 cars ahead of him. I think a lot of them are going to cross the line. Rev across line, a 1:22.4. Nino with a new fast lap, a 1:22.0. And the first 1:21 lap, Justin with a 1:21.779. I said it was possible, and he's not only made it possible, but he smashed it out the park. A 3/10 improvement, 2.5 tenths improvement to the previous pole sitter, Nino. And he puts in for an incredible lap as Zorzo goes 4th place, just 7/1000ths of a second slower than Luca ahead of him, provisional P4 for the Mercedes driver. But Justin, what a sensational lap, as it is now quickly beaten by the other Ferrari driver now on pole. A 121.712 beats the AlphaTauri driver by just 7/10ths of a second, or 67,000ths of a second, and now takes pole. Ferrari with a 1.5, Tuddy going 3rd place, the 3rd driver to get into the 121s with a 121.837. Some incredible lap times are being shown here today around this circuit, around this floodlit circuit. It looks like David will be going into the pits. You've got to be careful. These drivers have to be very careful with their pit entrance. We saw there David almost hitting the barrier into the pits. That certainly will be a dangerous one if they go in too quick. Haas driver Rudy goes in for P7, a 122.802. Oh, sorry, 082. Apologies for that. 4/100ths of a second, 1/10th quicker than Daniel, but 4/100ths of a second slower than the Mercedes ahead of him. The last driver on the grid to set a lap, who is on a lap, sorry, is going to be FRT Harvey for the Aston Martin. He is going certainly quite slow in that 2nd or 3rd sector. And I think he just might have backed out of this lap. He has. And we'll have to go in the pits for some extra fuel. Unfortunately, his initial first lap was an invalidated lap. But now for the first lap for everyone's session, that is the current and provisional race order with a Ferrari on top, AlphaTauri in P2, Strabel, Justin, Tuddy in P3, and Nino in P4. So incredible qualifying lap so far, but only 3 drivers in the 121s. And without a doubt, I think we will see 4 more drivers in there. We're going to see Nino, Luca, Zorzo, and Rudy. For all of them are just within 82/1000ths of a second of getting into that 121. And I don't doubt for a second that they can find that lap time and find that lap improvement around this beautiful circuit on fresh tyres, lower fuel, and more rubber on the track. Of course, as I mentioned, as the night goes on and the time does tick down, the grip will certainly start to really ramp up, and drivers are going to be flying. In fact, here we go. We're going to watch Luca again, as he's going to go for his 2nd hot lap under the floodlights. He's got himself a fresh set of softs, let's confirm that. He is on a fresh set of softs. Let's have a look at what the Ferrari man can do for his 2nd hot lap session. He's going to have a fairly clear track. He's got AlphaTauri, Alpine, and McLaren ahead of him. Hopefully they don't get in the way. If anything, they just might provide him with a little bit of tow if they're not careful. So we'll have to see him coming around that 5th corner. Very good exit. Slightly wide, but keeps it well under control. You can see the AlphaTauri driver, he is well out of the way. And actually, I think Luca has completely backed out of this lap. So perhaps just not too keen on that exit, and perhaps lost some time, in fact. So we'll have to see what he can do for his 3rd hot lap, as he's now coming round and coming past that McLaren. That McLaren is of Pico, who is trying to burn fuel. New meta in this game, burning fuel. You want to put 100% throttle and about 15 to 20% brake application, and you will find yourself burning fuel like there is no tomorrow. And if you include in that high revs, you're sorted. You will burn fuel. Unlike last game, where the meta was just simply high revs and nothing else. So now we'll be able to see what can Pika do. He's currently sitting in P11, provisionally P11, with his teammate ahead in P4. He is 1/100th of a second slower than Jacob ahead of him. And the question is now, he's going to start his 2nd flying lap of the session. Can he find himself the 420 milliseconds, or hundredths of a second, that he needs to get into the 121s? Or is he going to simply find exactly the time he needs to beat his teammate? We'll have to see now. Coming around the line, he's going to start his 2nd flying lap of the session. Let's have a quick look at this from the outside perspective. A beautiful orange McLaren car coming out of that 1st corner quite beautifully. Keeping his car very well under control. Got to keep the car within the white lines, as we have Arthur finally joining the session. Going around that 5th corner, you're taking as much of the track as you can on the outside. Take too much, though, you risk invalidating a lap, but it does look like a very clean exit for the McLaren driver. In fact, let's jump on board with him and see where is he going to brake. There's 150, there's the 100, right into the chicane, very close to the apex. Of course, you don't want to mount it too much. You will lose a lot of time. Slight snap there, perhaps just a visual glitch. And now DRS is wide open for the 2nd time in this lap. Now for the large left-hander, corner 9, keeping it very clean, as tight to the inside as you can. You want fast in, fast out, and he's done that beautifully. Now you got the quick right, then right-hander again. Heavy on the braking again. You've got to be really careful. You don't want to slam on that too hard. You will find yourself locking up, and that will lose you a lot of time now around the famous corner. And the 2 final right-handers to close out the session, 15 and now 16. Very careful on the throttle, easy to lose traction. Now across the line, it's going to be a 122.149. It is an incredible improvement for the McLaren driver, but unfortunately not enough to beat the likes of his teammate. Still just 1 and a bit tenths off the pace, as David now goes for 5th place in the AlphaTauri, sorry, and the 5th driver in the 121s. In fact, he's exactly 1/10 of a second as Rev Caterpillar. Oh my goodness, what a lap by the Aston Martin driver. Puts it on pole with a 121.654. He beats the competition by 6/100ths of a second and is now, no doubt in my mind, a driver to keep an eye on for the duration of this race. 29 laps around Abu Dhabi. And this will be quite an exciting one. Only 2 DRS zones on this circuit. 1 in the start of the 2nd sector, 1 at the end of the 2nd sector. Corner 5 to 6 is the longest straight, and 7 to 9. Because in fact, this small kink here, as we see Rev going through, that is technically corner 8. Which is a little ridiculous if you ask me. But we'll have to see what can the other drivers do. Certainly a tow can be very effective, but is it something people are going to do? As we see Tuddy cross the line, he does find some lap improvement, still just 2/10 off of P2, but still an incredible lap, as he is ahead of his teammate Sasha Andre in P15 at 122.6 for the Red Bull. I would like to say as well, I completely forgot to mention this at the start of the stream, I do apologise if I mispronounce anyone's name. I will try my best, or find an appropriate shortened version if I have to, though I think this lobby is actually quite simple. Everyone's name seems quite simple enough for me to pronounce, so I don't think I'll have much of an issue with that for this evening. So now as we wait for a few more drivers, a lot of them are in the pits. We have Tuddy currently going for an in-lap, I think. Rudy is also on an in-lap, and let's have a look at JT. He's also not going for a full flying lap, so now whilst we wait, Arthur's coming out for his first flying lap of the session. It's currently coming through the 2nd sector. I have some fun facts for this race, because unfortunately, with Formation Lap disabled, thank you EA for the several game bugs that you have developed in this sensational game that we all love to play. For the 29 laps that we will be going around Abu Dhabi, each lap is 5.28 kilometers long. The first ever Grand Prix around Abu Dhabi was 2009, but I still think, whilst it is very controversial, the 2021 race was quite exciting, all the way up until the 50th lap. However, the full race distance, so in a F1 Grand Prix, you have to go 300 kilometers to be able to complete a race. And this race will be finishing, because it's 50% long, 153 kilometers. And the elevation change, so there is some uphill and downhill corners. You can see that very easily as you come down towards the chicane after corner 5 down to 6 and 7 at the end of the first DRS straight. That you can see slight downhill, slight uphill. There's an elevation change throughout this whole circuit of 10.7 meters, and it is one of the flattest circuits on the calendar. So it'll be very interesting to see. Where, in fact, you can see there on the camera, there is that downhill effect into that first corner. But let's have a look now. Let's stop talking about the track and let's have a look at what the Williams driver can do for his first hot lap session. Unfortunately, joining with 8 minutes remaining. He's got 3 minutes left, And this is his one and only hot lap. He has to get this right. Unless he's got enough fuel, he could go for a second lap. But already he's got a purple first sector. Incredible first sector already. All eyes on this Williams, because he's missed out half the session, but he is not leaving any room for another error. Sorry, as Rev has retired from the session. He's happy with his lap time. For Pole now coming down towards that second DRS straight. He's keeping it very tight to the left-hand side of the line. You want to take the narrowest line as you can along the DRS straight. Now coming down towards the 9th corner. Go for a very wide exit. Oh, sorry, a very wide entry. I think he might have gone just a bit too deep there. But still quite happy with that lap. Still going, of course, into the final few right-handers. Now you've got the quick 2 left-handers. You've got to be very careful on the throttle here. Don't want to be too feisty on it, or you might just lose your car. He's keeping it very well under control. And now just 2 right-handers left to finish out this lap. What can he do? He had a purple first sector, not a purple second sector, and he comes across the line now with a 1:22.9. He has lost quite a bit of time compared to what his first sector was, but perhaps, I don't know. I don't think he's got enough fuel. We have to see. But let's now look at other drivers. We've got Justin coming through. He's coming down towards the second sector. He's backed out of this lap now. Perhaps looking to try and burn just a bit more fuel. A lot of traffic ahead of him as well. You can see on the mini-map, in fact, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 drivers ahead of this Aston Martin. So it would be quite a hectic lap to try and swerve through the lot. This is David, currently P7, the last of the 121s. And he's coming through into the second sector. Purple first sector for David. So now there is one driver to keep an eye on. I'm going to have to jump through a lot of them because only 1 minute remaining if you're in the pits, which is no one except for Rev, who's happy with his time. That is the end of the session, unfortunately, for Arthur. He hasn't got enough fuel, so that will be the end of the session for him as well. Harvey goes P2, a 1:21.7. Just half a tenth off his teammate, but still a provisional 1-2 for Aston Martin. Here we're going to see Ruddy. He's preparing now, coming around that final corner. He's going to start his flying lap of the session. Justin just behind Tuddy as well. Nice little train forming up. All drivers trying to find the gap and get ready for their lap. Next behind is going to be teammate to Red Bull, Sasha, sitting in P15. The Mercedes behind, let's have a quick look. That's going to look like to be number 11, Zorzo. He's going to start his hot lap. This is a lot of drivers trying to keep an eye on. I will do my best. We have a Ferrari driver coming towards the line. That's going to be Luca. And he's going to start his first lap of the session as David puts in the lap for pole. A 1:21.595, beating Rev Caterpillar by 6/600ths of a second. An incredible lap time by the AlphaTauri. But now let's have a look. So many drivers are on a hot lap. It's going to be very difficult to keep up with everyone, but let's see what we can do. Have a look at the mini-map. It looks like an Alfa Romeo. He's gone in the pits. He's happy with his lap. Can't find any improvement. McLaren next across the line. P7, Nino with a 1:21.7. Next goes Danielle for a new pole position. A 1:21.559. Next across the line, will be a Mercedes GT. Unfortunately not finding any lap improvement. The Ferrari is trying to get out of the way into the pits there. So that's 2 drivers into the pits. Who's next across the line? It's not a Red Bull. Looks like an Alpine, potentially. Harvey is retired from the session. And Ruddy crosses the line. He goes for P3, a 1:21.634. Next across the line is going to be a McLaren. Pico just behind his teammate, a 1:21.9. Next across the line will be another Alfa Romeo. It's Justin for a 1:21.779 as we have a new pole sitter again. Tuddy with a 1:21.534. This is going wild as Zorzo is in the pits and Luca is in the pits. That is the end of qualifying, and in the space of just 2 minutes at the end of this session, we have had not 1, not 2, but 4 different pole sitters before we now finish the session with Tuddy, a 1:21.534. All of these drivers finding such minute increments, or time improvements in the laps that they were doing at the end of that race, and Tuddy finding the most amount of time. The top 11 drivers all within the 1:21s, and I said we would see at least 7 in them, so my predictions were off for that qualifying session. But boy, oh boy, I am happy I was wrong there, because that was incredible to watch. Tuddy with a well-deserved pole position, A 25 1,000th, sorry, 1/10th even. That is even incredible. 1/10 splits the top 4 drivers. And if we have a look through the order, half a second for the top 12. Or just outside. And unfortunately, Arthur, 1.3 seconds off the pace. But still, an incredible qualifying session. I'm speechless, honestly. That was incredible. And now, we have a very exciting race ahead of us. 29 laps. I know I've said this multiple times. I do apologize. I am one to repeat myself sometimes. But we have 29 laps. And strategies are going to be interesting to see. I have seen from doing the Monday race for Tier 3, drivers opting to go for the hard-medium strategy, medium-hard as well, but then we also saw a handful of drivers opting for the hard-soft or soft-hard. So, one stop is definitely the most powerful, and that is of course assuming no safety cars, it will be the most powerful. But then the question is, who is going to be daring enough to start on the softs, knowing that they will die very quickly, but have the pace at the end of the race? Or potentially go conservative at the start of the race with the hard tyres, and end with low fuel and the much faster, the fastest tyre compound available to the drivers, and blitz through the pack at the end of the race. But there is a lot to risk on a soft, hard, or a hard-soft strategy. Any mess up at all, and the drivers will find themselves tumbling down the order with no recovery in sight without a safety car. And that's what I'm curious to know. Who's going to be willing to push the limit? Or who's going to play it safe? Who's going to play with a safe strategy of medium-hard or hard-medium? So we now wait for everyone to get ready for this race. Of course, you got to get in your strategies. Get in your tyre strategies, your fuel strategy, under fuel, over fuel. I think a lot of drivers will look to under fuel, as Abu Dhabi is actually quite a relatively, that's the word I'm looking for, sorry. It is a relatively comfortable circuit to be able to lift and coast, because obviously you have the DRS straights, and you have the long left-handers now of 9 and 5 instead of the chicane that originally was there. But are we going to see drivers risk it? A lot to risk here. I have to see. Just waiting to get the lobby going. We'll be able to see some exciting racing. Unfortunately, no formation lap due to game bugs. But I'll have to see what goes on. Just double checking to find out. I think there might have been possible. No, here we go. Right, we're going to ready up in just 1 minute. So this can be interesting to see what is going to happen. Here we go now, race start, 5 red lights, and away we go. Alpine and Red Bull on the front row. A very slow start, it looks like, for everyone, but still very good for Tuddy. But Danielle with the inside line now takes the lead of the race. You can see the Haas trying to get very feisty, trying to fight against the Alpha Tauri behind. Let's jump through the pack. And it looks like a very clean getaway for Danielle so far. Drobel and Justin up a position. Unfortunately, Harvey has gone down 3 positions. Drobel going down the inside, 3 wide for the Haas, the AlphaTauri, and the Ferrari. And there is contact at the back as Arthur, unfortunately, has had a bit of a moment there. Hopefully no damage to his car at all. And now look at them. All of those drivers trying to break the toe, trying to grab the toe, trying to go for the lead of the race. And we're going to have a battle for P1 into the chicane. Very close between the Alpine and the Red Bull, but not close enough for contact. Very clean racing so far. And we have the Haas and the AlphaTauri already going side by side, and Justin is out of this race. We already have now our first incident, and 5-second time penalty for Luca for a severe collision with the Red Bull. And now we have a safety car at the end of the second sector on the first lap. And that actually gives me an opportunity to have a look at the strategies. That is very interesting. No driver has opted to go for a dangerous move onto the softs. Only one driver is an alternate strategy. Drobel starting on the mediums and has managed to find his way up 2 positions. So far, a decent start for the Ferrari man. But how long can he go on those mediums? Of course, no one will pit, or at least I don't believe anyone will pit. They are on the hard compound tyres. These tires can last. Okay, never mind. I will take back my words. Zorzo, Sasha, Luca, Jacob has retired from the session, and Arthur are all in the pits for the session. Coming off of those hards, they're going to go for a medium strategy in this race then. And I guess I can completely understand the strategy that is there, because you don't lose any time. You will lose some track positions, you will lose some places to your competitors around, but you'll have much fresher tyres and much better tyres compared to the other drivers around. Of course, the front runners are all on hard. They will have to pit to the mediums at the end of the race. However, mandatory stop is completed for these 5 drivers. Soft tyres completely are not possible, but when everyone has to pit for the mediums, these guys can push medium and have the same amount of pace at the start of the race as they will at the end of the race. And now we're just going to wait for all of them to catch up to the rest of the pack. 17 seconds currently between Zorzo and the pack, and then Luca is just 5 seconds behind Sasha to catch up as well. And hopefully, if they do manage to catch up, of course, the safety car is going at a percentage, unfortunately I don't know the percentage, at a percentage of the race pace. I'm not actually too certain though, but I think they should be able to catch up at the end of this sector. It's all down to Luca if he can manage to get his car through the second sector as quick as possible and catch up. But I think the limit for the safety car will be around about these couple last corners, and safety car will not be in this lap, I don't think. We'll have to see. But it's going to be interesting now with Zorzo, Arthur, JT, Sasha and Luca all on the mediums. Unfortunately, first lap incident, we lost Justin, which brought out the safety car, and Jacob into the pits, opting to retire, and that will not be safety car in this lap. So we're going to have another lap, and now Luca catching up to the grid. We're going to have to see what strategy is going to work out. Drabel's still on those mediums, but unfortunately, he's not going to have the advantage, the one advantage you would hope against everyone else, is now there are 5 drivers behind with the same strategy on those fresh mediums. So now as we wait for another lap, we'll have to see at the end of the second sector, how is Danielle going to lead this restart? Are they going to wait for the final few corners, or are they going to push all the way up until the line and catch people way off guard and wait for that final corner? We will definitely have to see, and it'll be certainly an interesting one to witness. So now there it is. Safety car is in this lap. You can see already Danielle is going to slow the pack now. Take the time, warm up the tyres. Of course, the hard compound tyres are going to be very hard to warm up. You need to do the warm up perfectly for this restart. The medium runners, however, won't have to put in too much work to warm them up. Just a simple throttle and brake, or just simply swerving around the circuit will certainly, or sorry, weaving on the circuit will certainly warm them up. But now let's have a look. He's already gone. He's gone well before what I predicted. And now coming round that final corner, he's already got a 9/10 gap to Tuddy behind. Tuddy is already heavily under pressure from the AlphaTauri. And here we go for the 4th lap of the race. Safety car is gone. And DRS will not be enabled for the first 2 laps. So it won't be till lap 6 when we get racing again with the DRS, the drag reduction system, only 2 of them. And already a 1-second gap. Danielle is on fire on this safety car restart, has managed to pull out that 1-second gap and be able to defend beautifully now without the threat of DRS. There is a bit of a fight going on for P10. We're going to have a quick look at this. As we see Pico and Harvey having a bit of a go. We have a tussle as well, 2 wide coming down that straight. It looks very slow from this camera angle, but here comes the Ferrari man. He gets ahead of David. Those mediums are working in his favour, but now how far can he keep this going? He's got a 4/10 gap to the Haas driver ahead of him, and he needs to capitalise on that pace advantage now. In the coming laps, he will slowly lose that, and that will not be delightful for him. As you can see now, 2 wide, Nino and Rev trying to go for a battle here into that 9th corner now. Nino going around the outside has managed, down the inside for the McLaren. I mixed up with the wrong McLaren. I apologise for that. Now Nino up into P6, and both Aston Martin 7 and 8, and teammate for McLaren down in P10. Just 6/10 behind Zorzo for the Mercedes. 2.5 seconds. Danielle, what is this? League of their own. 2.5 second gap, crossing the line 1 lap after the safety car restart. And it has unfortunately gone wide in that first corner, but it doesn't matter too much. They are just flying away with it. Now it's just a battle for P2. What can Tuddy do? What can Rudy or Drabel do? Alternate strategy is going to be the advantageous strategy. Apologies. As we see Drabel going for a move down the inside. A beautiful move by the Ferrari man. And with still no DRS to the end of this lap, he's going to be able to keep up the pace, keep that position. He's going to go for a second move down this Spain straight. Can he go for it? Into the chicane, well into the brake zone. He is now up into P2. Drabel starting on the medium compound tyre. He qualified in P7. He's now up into P2. Tuddy down from P1. It's down to P3, and the alternate strategy is working beautifully in Drabel's favour, as we see Ruddy going for a position on the Red Bull as well. Tuddy potentially losing a few too many positions as they would have preferred, as we see Harvey then losing a position to Zorzo. So these are the medium runners who pitted on the first lap. Zorzo, Arthur, Sasha, Luca, and JT all pitted on the during the first lap, off of their hards onto fresh mediums, opting to go for a medium alternate strategy during this race, as they have already served their mandatory stop. DRS is now enabled. Drag reduction system within 1 second of the driver ahead, and you will be able to open that rear wing, gain extra speed up to 15 km per hour or 17 km per hour, as this is quite a high downforce track, so opening that rear wing is certainly going to improve your speed by a significant amount. The question is, though, who's going to be able to gain the biggest advantage with that DRS? We're going to see a Red Bull dive down the inside. Sasha and Arthur trying to go for a move on each other into that 5th corner. It was a beautiful dive by the Red Bull, but unfortunately not quite held through the corner. 2 wide now for the McLaren and the Aston Martin. The Williams and the Red Bull switch for the Aston Martin down the inside on Harvey there. And now McLaren Pico is ahead of this battle. Zorzo as well climbs another position. Those mediums again are going to give him a huge advantage. 2 wide now for the Mercedes up there. And the gap is still 2.5 seconds. Drabel may have had that tyre advantage, but he's not managed to cut that gap down significantly. If these medium runners are not careful, especially Drabel, he might just drop off a cliff very quickly. You need to maintain and manage these tyres. You have got to go 29 laps in this race and of which 13 to 17 of them will be done on the hards, whereas the mediums will only go about 10 to 14 laps before they really start to die and drop off a cliff. Zorzo again trying to go for a battle. Let's have a look on board. He's closing in on Nino ahead of him. Those mediums have managed to give him a lot of grip and keep up to the rear wing of that McLaren. He's going to have DRS now, but the issue is he's in a massive DRS train. Whilst the DRS train is optimal, you can then help defend the opponents behind you. You can't close that gap ahead of you because they're all getting a free toe, a free cut of the air, and they can continue to defend and attack simultaneously down that straight again for the second time. DRS wide open. DRS train not helping anyone just yet, but having said that, here comes Arthur. He's closing in that gap. He's not quite close enough to go for another move down the inside, but he is maintaining within that 2/10 gap quite comfortably. And speaking of 2/10, Drabel has now dropped another 2/10 to Danielle. I said, you know, he's not able to cap that time, but in fact he is. I just had to bite on my own words there. 2 seconds now. Drabel and Danielle fighting for the lead of the race, and Drabel is fighting vigorously as much as he can with those medium combat tires. We see Sasha going for a beautiful move into that 15th corner. Now on the 16th corner, Harvey down to P11 on those hards, and Sasha pitting on lap 1 has also capitalized just as equally as well as Zorzo ahead. Still 3 drivers who pitted at the start still yet to climb the order and overtake any hard compound runners ahead of them. Now it is all peace and quiet now, as all the drivers are all just trying to manage their tyres, manage their temperatures, manage their fuel, ERS. And it's going to be just a matter of time before the mediums drop off or the hards start to come properly in the pictures. We're going to see a sensational move around the outside. Arthur now capitalizing on that advantage and deciding, you know what, Harvey, I'm going to have this position as well. Going to follow the competitor ahead, Sasha up into P10, Arthur up into P11. Harvey has now lost not 1, not 2, but 6 positions after qualifying in 6th place. And his teammate just ahead in qualifying in 5th place, down to 8th place at the moment. Harvey's last lap, just 1 second off of his previous best. Doesn't look like anyone is willing to pounce just yet. If anything, it'll be the end of the second DRS straight, because of course then you have to defend for 2 sectors without DRS. And in fact, we're going to see a nice fight. We're going to see 2 fights, both McLarens trying to go too wide, both at the front and the back. Down the inside goes Nino on that Mercedes driver. Now he's ahead into 6th place. And if we have a look at his teammate, I'm not sure he managed to get ahead of Rev Caterpillar. He didn't, and unfortunately he's still finding himself 2.5 tenths behind. He's going to try and fight it. Nino is trying to go fight ahead and take another position for himself as David is down to P6. And I think we've lost another driver. JT has lost 2 positions after a driver error. Sorry. Luca and Harvey are now up into 11 and 12. You can see they're already coming out of that corner. Massive snap of oversteer. And Arthur into the pits. A 5-second time penalty, and that'll be the end of his race. Unfortunate end for the Williams driver. Came in with a beautiful lap at the start of qualifying. I saw it in the middle of qualifying. First hot lap at around about 4 to 5 minutes remaining. Set a purple first sector, a decent second sector, but unfortunately could not quite piece together a beautiful lap for the 3rd sector and qualified dead last. A very unfortunate race for the Williams driver. Hopefully we can see them come back next week and come back even stronger. But now all eyes on Danielle. Now as those mediums are starting to die off, we've got a fight at the back of the grid as well. As we've actually not got a fight, we've got a driver spun round. Sasha is now perpendicular to the track, drifting back on with so much grass on their tyres. Was fighting for P9 after a contact with the McLaren. Is now down to P12. That, without a doubt, will be reviewed by the stewards afterwards. As we then see Luca losing a position to JT as well. Mercedes driver trying to do his best to defend. You can see already blinking red lights in the back of some of these drivers, Luca being one of them. That means that they are low on ERS, below 10%, and they are trying to get back as much as they can. Of course, they've then used all of that ERS in the first 11 laps. You start the race at 100%, you can recharge under braking conditions or just under DRS conditions as well. Lift and coasting will help quite a significant amount with that. As Harvey is into the pits now, and he is also out of the race. This is the 4th driver now to have retired from the session. And that was at a very, very unfortunate end for the Aston Martin driver, who was on for a promising start, but unfortunately is now for a disappointing end in this race. 12 drivers remaining, and Drabel is the driver to keep an eye on. Alternate strategy for him, starting on the mediums, the rest of the medium drivers pitting on the first lap. And surely those mediums are starting to really struggle. I say that as Drabel closes in slowly on Danielle ahead, still just buffering or just casually waiting around that 2-second mark, and I think Danielle's going to continue to keep that up. But how long can these medium runners keep going? For 4 of them need to extend their first stint on the mediums as far as they can go. For their second stint will also be on the mediums, as the softs are just not an option for them at all. Crossing the line once more. 1.1 second is the gap. And Rev Caterpillar is at the back of this DRS pack. But Tuddy is the closest in it. 3/10 to Rudy ahead. Both on the same strategy. So we now rapidly approach the halfway mark in this race. You see gaps already starting to form. The DRS train at the back of the grid is starting to tumble. Pico is now out of that 1 second. Rev Caterpillar almost outside of that 1 second. And Rev Caterpillar just dipped into that outside that 1 second. Has managed to stay back inside. Drabel now 1.6 seconds. Crucially, perhaps Danielle making a mistake in this lap. Losing themselves 4/10 to the competitors behind. As the pressure is on those mediums, you've got to push them as much as you can because you don't want to go too far. Of course, if you leave out and stay out on those mediums for too long, the hards won't be as powerful as you would once hope for them to be when you start your second stint. Now coming around that that pit entry, we're going to see Luca not go in, but a massive drift coming into that final corner. And you can already see then, without a doubt, those tyres are screeching. Luca now into the pits. Please don't be another retiree. It is not, thank goodness for that. He's going to come into the pits. He's going to go on for a second stint on the mediums. And now, let's see what Luca can do. He's got to put in one hell of an in-lap and somehow make these tyres last. 16 laps on the mediums, and he went for 11 laps. Potentially, he's looking for a safety car again and hoping for then to pit on the softs. We'll have to see what's going to happen. 16 laps remaining. Who knows what will happen? 4 drivers out. 1 driver, Justin, out on the first lap. Unfortunate incident caused a safety car. Jacob into the pits, then retired shortly after that. About 5 or 6 laps in. Arthur involved in a contact, then retires in the pits, and Harvey again as well. Just not quite finding the grip, retires in the pits as well. So 3 drivers out by choice 1. I think potentially murdered, though we'll have to see what the stewards will have to say. Of course, it is ultimately down to them. because obviously they know the rulebook best. But I know the drivers best. We're going to see drivers come round. We're going to see Drabel go in the pits. Now he's done with those medium combat tires, so Rudy's going to come up into P2. Sasha with the first 3-second time penalty for track limits, and David is in the pits for off of the hards onto the potential mediums for 15 laps. JT with a 3-second time penalty as well for track limits, potentially crossing that white line on pit entry as he is now in the pits to come off of those mediums, 12-lap-old mediums, onto the mediums again. So it's going to be a strong medium tyre finish for multiple drivers, as we're going to see Drabel come through the pits. And, yeah, that is exactly what I thought it was. There was a spin there by Sasha. Those tyres are in a lot of pain. And Luca trying to do everything they can, trying to get round the Red Bull driver as clean as they can. They got fresh tyres. And down the inside, a very easy move for that Red Bull driver. Manages to smoothly pass. Basasha on 12-lap-old medium, Zorzo on 12-lap-old medium, sitting in P5, so an incredible race so far for the Mercedes man. Potentially hoping to stick with the pack as they all pit as well. Zorzo having stopped already at the start of the race, like many drivers behind those who are on a 2-stop started the race on those mediums. Oh, sorry, pitted on the first lap onto those mediums. And Sasha and Zorzo, the only 2 drivers left to stay out. Zorzo staying out again. Nino's done with his hards. Rev's done with his hards. This is very interesting. Perhaps the Mercedes drivers managed to find enough pace, or perhaps have a perfect setup to help maintain his tyre temperatures, maintain his tyre wear, and is able to extend the stint even further. Already starting with 13 laps on the mediums, this means he can without a doubt finish the race on the mediums, because of course he will have less fuel. Tyre wear will be reduced, and with that as well, the tyre temperatures will be a lot more manageable. Nino now out of the pits, coming out in 6th place, with a 2.5-second gap ahead and a 1.2-second gap behind. His teammate just a few seconds back in P10. Pitting 1 lap ago, half a second off. But now 14-lap-old hards for the top 3, and Rudy is down to that 1.7 gap. So Drabel managed to cut that gap down from 2.4 to 1.8, but now Rudy is cutting that gap down from 1.8 to 1.68. Rev and Pico are having a bit of a tussle now into that 9th corner. We've got our race leader Danielle in the pits, Tuddy and Zorzo in the pits as well. Rudy is our new race leader in this Abu Dhabi Grand Prix for round 6. And we're going to see the mediums slapped on for Danielle, for Tuddy and for Zorzo. Rudy is still out, extending their hard tyre stint, but for how much further can they go before they run the risk of losing too much time? Luca with the fastest lap, a 1:25.049 for him, and Drabel finds himself now up into P2 on those 2-lap-old mediums. And where will Danielle come out? Comes out of the pits now with a 1-second gap, but a massive tyre advantage for the next 5 laps at least to the Alpine driver. Could it potentially be another race victory for Danielle? Who knows? Still 13 laps remaining and a lot can happen. And certainly a safety car would spice things up at the end of this race. A lot of drivers would certainly opt to end the race on the soft compound tyre. And the question is then, who would win? And that would be interesting. I think if anyone deserves it, it would have to be the likes of Rudy or Zorzo going for an alternative strategy, but extending their stints as far as they can now, as Zorzo pitted off the mediums at the same time as the hard compound runners ahead of him, as to lose as the minimum amount of time, as his competitors around him. So he's on the same set of tyres now, same age tyres as the drivers around him. Rudy now into the pits. He's going to come off those hards. We're going to have a look at Drabel now, who has a 3.5 gap now into those final couple corners. Drabel will be our new race leader, but for how long before Danielle manages to take the lead with those fresh tyres? Nino with a 1:24.8. Rudy comes out on those fresh medium tyres and will come out in the midst of this battle and potentially ahead of the first, nay, ahead of the second Mercedes driver. Comes out the pits now, just ahead of Pico, 4/10 gap. So now, all drivers are on a very similar strategy. Drabel, who started on the mediums, is now going to finish on the hards and is now heavily under pressure from Danielle. We're going to see them go too wide with the DRS advantage and the tyre advantage. We will see Danielle retake the lead of this race, and we're going to see another fight at the back of the race, back of the grid there. The Haas getting through, contact between the Mercedes and the Haas, and the Mercedes and the McLaren too wide out of the chicane. Somehow still keeping it quite clean. Tyres are banging. And here comes Rev Caterpillar, 3 wide now, coming down the second DRS straight. And down the inside, Rev Caterpillar finds himself up into P9, Pico into Rev into P8, Caterpillar, Pico into P9, and Zorzo into P10. And you can already see blinking red light for the McLaren, low on ERS. And that certainly will be a huge loss if he does not manage to regain that ERS in the coming laps. He's going to be heavily under pressure. Zorzo on the much fresher mediums, but Rudy ahead of this battle, coming out just a lap ago, across the line now, first lap on those mediums, with an 8/10 gap behind and a 1.7 second gap ahead. We have a yellow flag at the back of the grid, and that will be unfortunately for Sasha. No virtual safety car, no safety car at all for that. Fortunately able to keep the car going. But, oh my god, here comes Nino. Where was that? I didn't even see that come up on the timing screens. Here comes Nino on the 3-lap-old mediums compared to the hard compound tyre. Early stage is going to have a massive advantage and now takes P2. He qualified. Let's have a quick look at this. Qualified P9, and the Ferrari, unfortunately, very late on the brakes, finds himself out-braking himself, and contact between him and the McLaren finds Nino spinning around, originally in P2, now down to P6, as Tuddy has unfortunately disconnected from the session, sitting in P2. Hopefully we can get them reconnected and regain that P2, but provisionally he's going to get out of the way. Drabel is back into P2 and David is back where he qualified, P3 for the AlphaTauri driver, as the teammate for Ferrari comes through, and there's another contact through, 3-4 car contact now, and Rudy is out of this race. Drabel is out of this race. David, the 5-second time penalty for severe collision. Drabel has left this session, unfortunately, after that incident. And there is a lot of damage, and there is a full safety car. 10 laps to go. Tuddy has rejoined, and unfortunately is having connection trouble. But a contact between the two Ferraris finds one of them now out of the race and the other in P2, net P2, comes into fit the soft compound tyre. This is exactly what I predicted would spice things up. A safety car would spice everything up, and unfortunately, 3 drivers have been caught out. David, JT, and Danielle have been caught out of the safety car and will not be able to capitalise to go onto the fresh tyres. Nino onto fresh mediums, Pico onto the fresh mediums as well. And this will help bring Sasha back up into the battle with a 45-second gap after a previous spin in the 9th corner. So now Luca, in terms of race pace and tyre advantage, will be potentially on for a race victory. He just needs to keep the laps together, and for however long the safety car is out, he has to manage his tyres as best as he can. Zorzo, the second driver on the softs, and Rev as well, third driver on the softs. Unfortunately, perhaps a strategy error, but Nino and Pico onto those medium tyres is going to have a disadvantage in the early stages of the race. Perhaps a strategy masterclass for the McLarens, knowing that the mediums will be the advantageous tyre, at the end of the stint for the softs, because of course they cannot survive 10 laps. If the mediums can just about survive it, the softs will surely not. So now, it is the waiting game. Danielle is coming around into the pits now, going to grab themselves the soft compound tyre. JT as well is going to go into the pits for their tyres. Same with David. So we're going to have the top 3 now into the pits. Luca's going to come around that final corner. He's going to take net P1 potentially. It depends on how quick this stop is for Alpine. He's already out of the pit stop. You can see the AlphaTauri there. He's going to lose position to the Ferrari. The Mercedes as well is going to lose position to the Ferrari. But I think Danielle just might have been able to pit in time and still regain the lead of the race. They have a beautiful pit stop for Alpine, finds them still at the lead, at the top of the timing sheets with pole position, or P1, sorry, and Luca with a 3-second time penalty, for track limits, along with JT and Sasha. A podium finish is unlikely. We'll have to see, though. I say that, I mean, a lot can happen. A safety car came out. That's a lot. JT up 10 positions. Luca up 10 positions as well. Zorzo and Pico up 8 and 5 positions. Nino up 6. And unfortunately, Rev Caterpillar down by 2. David down by 5. Tuddy down by 8. And Sasha remains in P10, the last point-scoring position. So now it is all eyes on Danielle, on Nino and Zorzo. Top 3 drivers without penalties. Can they keep it clean, remain within that time gap to the drivers ahead, and gain a free position after penalties? Of course, the 2 McLarens are on the mediums. David and Tuddy on the fresh mediums as well, and Sasha on the slightly old, slightly scrubbed mediums. Could it be a strategy masterclass to finish on the mediums, knowing full well the softs will have the advantage now? But for how long can that advantage hold up? Safety car in this lap. And now the drivers, you can see Danielle weaving, trying to put heat into those tyres. We're going to have a look at the telemetry now, coming around that 15th corner, now around the 16th corner. Of course, full DRS for everyone, and they're going to go already with a 4/10 gap. Nino is under pressure from JT behind. In fact, no, JT is under pressure from his teammate behind. 1 second gap between Pico and Rev Caterpillar. Pico and Zorzo. And the race is on. 8 laps to go. 7 laps, or 6 laps of racing with DRS enabled at the end of the second lap after safety car restart. And already Danielle is managing to beautifully stay on for P2 already in that first sector. But I say that, here comes Luca pitting 2 laps ago for the softs. 2 wide now, down towards this chicane. Danielle on the inside, the Ferrari on the outside. Who's going to be able to come out on top? So we see the Mercedes try to go for a move as well. Heavy on the brakes, but here comes the Ferrari down the inside, 2 wide still. And there is contact between the 2 of them, but light enough. I don't see any damage to either party. The Alpine is still ahead. And Luca just behind. Nino is defending beautifully. Those mediums has not been a huge loss so far in the early stages of this race. Again, still trying to fight it out. And Rev Caterpillar tumbling down the order. What's happened to Rev? He's had a spin at the end of that 9th corner, as he's now gone down to 10th place. Sasha up into 9th place. And a lot of drivers climbing 1 position after a very unfortunate spin. A potential contact for the Aston Martin. Now coming around the final corner. 1 more lap to go before DRS is enabled. And Danielle continues to lead the pack. Fastest lap to Tuddy, a 1:24.5 on those mediums compared to the softs. It's all now just a waiting game. These drivers have got to be patient, manage those tyres, manage the ERS, manage the fuel that they have, potentially low fuel in this session, we don't know. And just 2 more sectors to go. DRS will be enabled. And this is where it's going to get very exciting. But we don't need DRS. Luca doesn't need DRS for certain. He's closing that gap down. And he's closing it now. In fact, here comes Nino from behind. I was expecting an attack at the front. But here comes Nino trying to close that gap down to the Ferrari. Not quite close enough. But certainly into the braking zone had the advantage. And again into the braking zone. Closing that gap down. Having a brilliant exit. And keeping within 3/10 to the driver ahead of him. How long can he keep this up? Because this is going to work beautifully in his strategy. Matter of fact, Danielle could be at risk at losing the lead of this race. Luca making a driver mistake there. Now finds himself 2/10 ahead of Nino in a 9/10 gap. DRS now enabled outside that 1 second zone. Luca has got to push before that DRS detection zone at the start of the second sector. He's going to find himself defenseless, from a very fast McLaren driver behind. He will have the DRS. He will soon have the advantage and he potentially will have a huge ERS advantage now coming around that corner. DRS detection zone. Luca is within that 1 second. Now coming towards the line. There goes Luca. DRS wide open for all the drivers behind. A massive DRS straight all the way, or DRS train all the way down to Tuddy. And now people are closing in too wide from multiple drivers. We're going to see the Mercedes have a battle with his teammate. Down the inside goes Zorzo into the chicane and finds himself up into P4 now. And there was a battle just behind, as you see Tuddy and Pico. Pico having to go just a bit wide there. Potentially a contact between the two of them, but Tuddy now up into P7, trying to close that gap down to what provisionally could have been a P2 for him, but an early disconnect from the session did see him tumbling down the order. David is now closing that gap down. He's going too wide with the Mercedes, trying to fight it out with the two of them. Contact between the two as well. Front right and rear left tyres having a bit of a high five session in the middle of this race. And they should be battling very close, not getting so close though to risk a contact where a spin could happen. Now coming around that final corner, a 1 second gap to race leader, and the pressure is on. Luca has got to defend like a lion. Zorzo with a new fast lap, a 1:24.560. George cheering on Dan. I mean, I think you're cheering on the right driver, because they are with a 1.3 second lead, 1.4 second lead now, and have no DRS battle behind. I thought there was going to be contact there between the AlphaTauri, but there isn't. It's very clean racing for them all so far, but now here comes down the straight. Luca loses a position to Nino down that DRS straight. Unfortunately, no DRS to defend them. In fact, there's going to be 2 positions lost. Zorzo climbs the pack up into P3 now. The top 3 without penalties, and Zorzo finds himself up into the podium positions. Rev Caterpillar having to pit, unfortunately, after an early spin, now finds himself with the fast lap, a 1:23.8. Danielle did have that gap. That gap is now starting to really close down. It's going to be in this third sector. We're going to see Nino really capitalize. Of course, on the medium tires, you can push them more than the softs. You can push the wear and the temperatures on the mediums more than you can on the softs, knowing full well that the tires will hold up. So this is where the advantage falls to Nino's hands, as Sasha now gets a 3-second time penalty for track limits, and that'll be the second one in this race. But now the race is on as Nino finds himself within that 1 second gap. Crucially, he has cut that gap down in half to Danielle ahead, and clearly has more downforce in that third sector. But as I mentioned, has enough tyre wear left to push them. When you've got a harder compound, you can really push them and not have to worry about the limits of what they can handle, knowing full well the competitors around you on the soft compound have got to manage those temperatures. JT now up into P6, a battle with the Red Bull down the inside into the chicane, finds himself comfortably ahead, but now pressure from the Red Bull behind. 3/10, 2/10 is the gap, and he's closing in. He's trying to go for a move around the outside. DRS is going to be wide open for the two of them. Drag race to the corner and into the braking zone. Who's going to be late on it? And it's going to be a small bump between the two of them, but the Red Bull around the outside is ahead. Now up into P6, a beautiful move by the Red Bull driver. Small contact though, still though, it's small. He managed to get through very cleanly. Nino, this is getting interesting. 3/10 gap now. Could this be the strategy masterclass that Nino needs to pull off to take the lead of the race? He's going to come down this main straight. No DRS on this main straight. He just needs to keep up the pace for not one, but how many corners? 4 corners to get to the DRS detection zone. And he is comfortably within that DRS detection zone limit of 1 second to get that DRS. In fact, he could make the move before the corner. He's not going to. He's going to wait patiently behind, grab a free toe, free exit, free DRS. And now, we are going to potentially see a new race leader coming down the straight. DRS, a very easy move for the McLaren driver. And our new race leader is Nino. No defense by Danielle. He's going to have DRS now on this second straight. And the question is then, can Nino defend this? He's got a 6/10 gap already coming on the exit of that corner. Luca is now jumped ahead of David. And whilst Nino does not have DRS, he clearly has the grip and the confidence in his car and his tyres to keep up the lead of the race. Nino now comes into that third sector, and if he keeps this up, he will be leading the race as of lap 27. Only 2 laps to go, or 3 laps to go. And he could pull off a strategy masterclass for the race victory. Let's have a look, though. Still lots to happen. 2 seconds now between Tuddy and Zorzo, so the top 3 are on a race of their own as Luca tumbles down the order. JT as well. And there is a driver, that's a Ferrari. Luca coming around the final corner, unfortunately losing traction of his car. 7 lap old softs for the Ferrari man, finds himself into the wall. But no safety car for in the final window. No safety cars. Luca now out of this race. Rev Caterpillar will find himself scoring 2 points instead of 1 in P9. Tuddy starting to really close that gap down. It was 2 seconds. It's now 1.7. And the further he pushes into this third sector, the closer he can get to getting DRS. There is a bit of a tussle at the back there between Pico and Sasha. No, Pico and JT, sorry. Light contact between the two of them, but clean racing still. And now with that DRS advantage, unfortunately, the Mercedes is just defenseless to this move, and down the inside goes Pico up into P6. His teammate, however, I thought would be in the clear in this third sector. He came into that third sector after the DRS, 2 DRS straights, down to 2.5 tenths. So could it be under DRS? He is under pressure. But if he's not under DRS pressure, he can lead the race. 2 laps remaining, 28 and 29. And the race seems to have certainly calmed down. Half a second gap between P1 and P2. DRS will be enabled for the top, for P2 and P3, P5 and P7. But overtaking opportunities will open up for the soft compound runners. Can David, though? 9 lap old mediums. He's going to have DRS. He's going to have a 3/10, nay 4/10 gap now to the Red Bull ahead. Could he be on for a potential P5 in this race? And he can see his competitor ahead. He's got flashing red light. So he is now also low on ERS. This is where conserving your ERS is going to play a huge part at the end of this race. Who's going to lead in this battle is going to come down to the drag races and who has the most ERS. Because, of course, if you got the most, you can defend like a lion or you can attack like a lion and no one can do a damn thing. Cross the line, final lap of the race. And Nino is in the lead. A 6.5 tenth for the McLaren driver. 6.5 tenth lead now down to 5 tenths. Zorzo 6.5 tenths. Tuddy 2.2 seconds behind, 2.3 seconds behind. David half a second behind, but here comes Danielle closing that gap down in that DRS zone. Closing 3 tenths, now down to 6 tenths, now up to 5 tenths. It is fluctuating all over the place. The question is, though, does he have enough in the bank to be able to take the lead of the race? He is going to take the lead of the race. But can he defend it? 1 more DRS straight to go into the chicane. 2 wide for the McLaren and for the Alpine. Small bit of contact, perhaps just a snap of oversteer. But here comes the McLaren now. Final DRS for this driver. And now, dump everything that you've got. The Alpine sticks to the inside line. The Alpine then dodges to the outside, goes to the inside again. And now into the third sector is remaining in the lead of the race. Could Nino have lost this? It's all down to this final sector. And I can't tell who's going to win this race because it's all coming down to the wire. 2 final left-handers, 2 final right-handers. And Nino with a driver error and a snap of the rear is not going to be able to close that gap down. And Danielle manages to beat Nino, finishing on the soft compound tyres and wins the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Round 6 goes Alpine. Danielle continues to extend that lead And Nino, after a beautiful strategy change to go for the mediums over the softs, unfortunately just loses out on the final DRS straight. Could not quite get the switchback for the inside line and take the lead of the race, and misses out by 7/10 of a second. Without a doubt, a very spicy finish. Zorza with a 10 place gain. 10 places gained. Granted, 7 drivers unfortunately out of the session, but still an incredible drive for the Mercedes team. For Zorza, I'm speechless. That race certainly did not end the way I was expecting. Without a doubt, Zorza would get the driver of the day for me. Nino, a sensational drive as always. He's always one to keep an eye on. He manages to keep that ERS up. He did it around Zandvoort, which is another tricky circuit to try and maintain his ERS. And he did it again today, but just unfortunate for him. He had his ERS, he had the advantage, but he couldn't close that gap down quick enough in that second DRS zone. So very well-deserved victory for the Alpine driver. But boy, oh boy, Nino, he certainly deserves to be on that podium. One hell of a drive for all three of them. And that will be the end of round 6. Unfortunately, that will be it. I would have been joined by Flynn. It would have been nice to know his thoughts for this race. Not feeling too great this week. Hopefully he will be back to 100% for the race next week. It would be nice to have my co-commentator back for the session. So best wishes to him and a speedy recovery for Flynn. But what a race. Incredible race. Rev Caterpillar with the fastest lap, a 1:23.8. Unfortunately, a 3-stop race for many by choice, but for Rev, the choice slipped out of his hands after a spin in the 9th corner. Saw him tumbling down the order. And unfortunately, Luca retiring on the 27th lap. Just before he crossed the line, he had very old softs, and it would have been a strategy that could have worked out in his favour, but unfortunately not managing those tyres and a poor exit did find himself spinning into the wall. That was a mouthful of a race. I could not catch up. I do apologise if I missed out any of the battles, but still, it was exciting for the battles that I did manage to capture. And Danielle continues to extend their lead in this championship for Tier 3. This is getting very interesting. This could be another Max Verstappen who could potentially win the championship before the end of the season. I mean, who knows? A lot can happen, and a lot of interesting circuits are still yet to come. So please, I do hope to see you guys again for the next round. Thank you, everyone, for joining. My name's been Darkness. It's been a pleasure to commentate for you all, and I will see you next week.